Because but then there's the morning star. And all those stars are imitations of the real star. Because here's the point. The whole purpose of Harlot Babylon, I'm going to explain what that is here in this next session, is to draw worship away from Jesus and to put it on humans, and eventually, and this is the whole point of this next session, they will take that worship and cause people to worship Satan.
Let me just do this real quick. I'm sorry, because I feel like we're not going to have a chance afterwards. So everyone, I don't want to break up what's going on.
This is good.
I know we're locked in. Just talking about Dr. Dre and everything, but so what we do want to do is because people have been asking me since you've been here today. Registration was free. We just wanted to get a head count as to how many people we needed to feed, so that's why we did registration. But people have been asking for ways to give today. If you want to give an offering, you can give an offering. You can do the Cash App, which is the Equipping Center, PHL, and then we have text to give to, I never remember the number. But anyone who needs to know how to give or ways to give, if you're not doing Cash App, you can bring cash up. If you can give it to Melvin over there. Melvin, can you raise your hand if you don't know who Melvin is? And I don't think we can do cards today, can we? No, we can't do any cards. But we do have text to give. If you need to know that phone number, I'll look it up for you and I can give it to you. So the Equipping Center. It's the Equipping Center, right? The Equipping Center.
PHL.
Okay. What? Equipping Center PHL. Try that. All right. Equipping Center PHL. I'm a bad offering taker. Sorry. So you can give it that way. Jose has denied an offering today. He told us. He said he don't want anything. So we will do well with this offering. He told us to give it to a single mother. So we want to be a blessing to somebody. So whatever you give, it won't be going to Jose or his family, but we can bless him spiritually with our prayers and everything.
And coffee. I'm happy with the coffee.
He's happy with the coffee and the food.
The salad was great.
All right. So I don't want to take any more time. Thank you so much for giving. I want, however, we're going to flow moving forward. I don't know if Jose is going to do more question and answer or if you're going to minister.
Is that cool?
Okay. However you want to do it.
Okay. Let's talk about the day of the Lord. Yeah. No, you're good. I love it. Yeah. Not all church is good church, but keep going. Absolutely. I just don't listen to it. I don't listen to it. No. That's up. That use between you and the Lord. I don't. Because here's why. Because I know where the source is. Let me say it like this. It's between you and the Lord, and I'll never tell you what to do, unless it's clearly defined in Scripture. Like I would tell you, don't ever get drunk, because the Scripture tells you don't drink. I mean, not to get drunk. If you don't feel convicted about having a glass of wine, that's between you and the Lord. You can have one, but you can't get drunk, right? Here's what I would say. My answer to you is this. Let's say I gave you brownies. You came and you ate these brownies. Every time I came here to preach, they were the best brownies you had. But then one day I told you, by the way, just so you know, one of my ingredients is poop. One of the ingredients is poop. Well, but you were like, well, these are like some really good brownies. But at the end of the day, you're just eating a bunch of, you know what I mean? And so here's where I'm at. And I feel from the Lord. I want to share this dream with you guys. A friend of mine had. I'll share one portion of it. In the dream, yeah, this is fine. This can be on camera. I'm not going to talk about Dr. Dre. I didn't want to tell that story. So, let me tell you, so my friend had a dream. In the dream, the Lord's calling me to this deeper place of consecration. And in this dream, I keep talking about pomegranates. So, and he said, it's a time for the pomegranates. It's time to eat the pomegranates, all that stuff. What was the pomegranates? The pomegranates. So if you were the high priest and you were going into the Holy of Holies to offer up the sacrifice, on the bottom of your garment, you had these bells, and the bells were made to look like pomegranates. And they were bells. Why? Because you would have to go moving inside, because if there was sin in your life, you would drop dead as soon as you walked into the Holy of Holies. In fact, high priests historically would not sleep the night before in case they had a wet dream, because if they had a wet dream, they would die the next day. It's exciting, isn't it? Oh, it's terrifying. And so, when I had this dream, I said, because there was some music I would listen to, nothing crazy, and the Lord said, no, I want you to set yourself apart because I want to release the sound of consecration from your life. And we're going to really get into this in a second. The point is this: there is another agenda. You do what you feel led to do, right? Like, because Paul says all things are lawful, not all things are expedient. And so when I look at things, my question, when I'm going to make a decision outside of clearly defined biblical sin, right? Clearly defined biblical sin, there's no arguing it. It is what it is. Adultery is a sin. I don't care how it makes you feel. It's a sin. And if it makes you feel good, you're probably wicked. You know, it's whatever. But the point is, there's things that's not clear. And here's how I make my decisions. I don't make my decisions based upon whether it's right or wrong. I make my decisions like this. Does it hinder my ability to connect with the presence of God? If the answer is yes, it's out. And there's just certain things. And there's certain music where maybe when I was a younger believer, I didn't feel as bad. And there were certain things I'd listen to, and all of a sudden, I would just feel the dove depart a little bit. And I was like, whoa. Or the next time I went to pray, it took a little bit of time to get in. Or I noticed that I lost my cool a little bit easier. Or I would get a little bit offended too easily. All right? Or like the lust thing would come on you. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. That song, because that song touches you. And so I'll cut it off. In other words, if I participate in something, and the next time I go to spend time with the Lord, it takes me a little bit longer to get in, that thing is not, because what will happen is it'll corrupt you eventually. So I would encourage you to search your heart out. And what is it doing to your heart? What's it doing to your spirit, man? And the last thing on that note is this. I remember one time I got rid of all secular music, and I told this guy named Andy Bird, I said, I got rid of all this music. And he said, when you stand before the Lord and you look into his eyes for the first time, you won't regret one radical decision you ever made for him. You'll look in his eyes and you'll be like, it was all worth it. It was all. I didn't listen to that music, but my God, look at these eyes. You know, in a moment, things like the restrictions that they won't even matter. In a moment, it's like, all right, so I don't have a television. I don't watch TV. Oh my God, you're missing out. I was like, oh, you're missing out. You know how much stuff I'm eating? That's why I'm teaching the session and half the people aren't. I'm being facetious, but the point is like, no, like, are you serious? This is amazing. I know, like the TV was distracting me, but man, like I do this. This is awesome. You know, my daughter is watching me do this. And now she's got a little Bible. She doesn't know how to read, but she'll be like, Bible? But she's mimicking me. And she's not mimicking me watching television, she's mimicking me read Hebrews. You know what I mean? And so the point is like, it won't even matter. It won't matter. In a second, it won't matter. And then having kids, you just start thinking about the songs you're playing. And I start thinking about, man, I know what spirit's behind this. I know too much. I know what's behind this song. And I know what Bone Thugs and Harmony were doing when they made the first album. Bone Thugs and Harmony. You might be too young for that. Yeah, you're too young. You don't know about established 1999. Yeah, established 1999. You don't know about that. Anyway, but the point is, I know. And when you know, and my kids are in the car, I'm like, I know what that spirit is. And I've casted it out of people. You know what I mean? And so you just start thinking differently. Anyway, Langston.
I was just wondering, because you know, a lot of times nowadays you hear just different musicians like in the middle of worship sets kind of sample certain songs. Like, so do you feel like that would hinder just the atmosphere?
Yes. What business has light walking with darkness? Here's the deal. I can go listen to a bunch of guys, or I can go to the source of all creativity and have him teach me. I mean, the Lord of glory can teach. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I can go to Quincy Jones, or I can go to Jesus. I can go to Bob Dylan, or I can go to, I mean, like, there's one who's way more, go look at the mountains. I want that guy to teach me music. I mean, King David didn't have those resources. He had the Lord. And he's king, he's way more famous than all those guys. I mean, imagine if he got songwriting royalties. My goodness. Anyways, thank God for Tom Brady. That's how we got into this. This whole circle.
I have this like a comment. How do I phrase this? There's a, like two people can be saying the exact same thing, and one can have the spirit of God on it, and
Exactly.
one can be dead. Like Leonard Ravenhill talks about like dead men on pulpits preaching dead sermons. There's only just the law. There's no like.
There's no life coming out of it.
Right,
Exactly.
nothing that even like some of the things you're saying, I've heard it from dead men, and I'm just like, ugh. But like when you say it, I'm like, dang. Like when I release the sound of worship, I want it to be pure. And so what is in my life that maybe doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it's being a bit of a veil. Like that.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
No, that's so good. That's encouraging. And I think the Spirit is real. You know, we want to. All right, so let's jump into this. Okay, we're talking about the day of the Lord. So just like we did with the positive, we're going to talk about the negative stuff. The day of the Lord. Now remember, the day of the Lord is talking about the final 3.5-year period. That is also known as the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation. All right, you guys ready for all the heavy stuff? All right, the Great Tribulation will be the most difficult and the most important 3.5 years in human history. So let that sink in. Because this is it. This is the end of the story. This is where everybody's going to pick their side for the last time. Look at this, Matthew 24, we're looking at verse 21, 22. Jesus said, for there will be great tribulation. Now, why does he say great? Because there has been tribulation before, but this one is going to be far greater than any other one. Such has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. Unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. He's talking about physically. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. It's pretty sobering, right? This is great tribulation. Now, I'm going to point this out to you guys. During the Great Tribulation, there's going to be 2 severe waves of death that hit the earth. All right? We're starting off already nice and heavy. The first one will claim 1/4 of the earth's total population. Let's go to this, Revelation 6:8. Power was given to them over 1/4 of the earth to kill with the sword, to kill with hunger, and to kill with death, and by the beast of the earth. And that's not even the wrath of God. That's the judgment. Again, that's all. So 1/4 of the earth's population is killed. And then afterwards, in Revelation 9, an additional 1/3 of the earth is going to be killed. It says, then the 4 angels were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. And that means in total, 50% of the earth's population will be killed during the Great Tribulation. Now, how many people are on the earth today? 6 billion? Right?
Wait, is that half of like
The whole world.
everyone in general?
Everyone in general. So there's what, 6 billion people? That's 7, what did you say, 7? 7, so let's call it 8, right? Between now and then, let's call it 8. Now imagine COVID, how crazy it was. In 3.5 years, we're talking about 4 billion people killed. A lot. It's never happened. I don't even know if that many people have died in human history in totality. So I want to just this is a sobering time that we're coming into. Thank God for coffee. Okay. Isaiah prophesied that few people would be left on the earth. Look at this. Isaiah chapter 24. I'll skip around a few of the verses between verses 1 and 6. He says, behold, the Lord makes the earth empty. The curse has devoured the earth. The inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. It's a very, very sobering picture of what's getting ready to come on the earth. So pressure, and I emphasize that word because there's going to be great pressure. Pressure in the Great Tribulation is going to come from various sources. Various sources. The first, from the wrath of God, which is going to be poured out in full strength on the Antichrist. Again, who's the wrath of God for? The Antichrist. Second, the pressure is going to come from the rage of Satan, who's going to persecute God's people through the Antichrist's reign of terror. Right? Look at this, Revelation 12:12. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. So during the Great Tribulation, Satan loses his ability to go up into heaven, and he's shot down to the earth, and he's stuck on the earth. So he will literally be on the earth during that entire period. And the last one, as the pressure is going to come from the actions of evil people whose sinful deeds is going to reach its fullness. Right? Daniel talks about the fullness of sin. I'll answer your question in just one second. Look at Daniel 8:23. In the latter time, talking about during the Great Tribulation, transgression will reach its fullness, or transgressors will reach its. In other words, we will see the full manifestation of sin, just like we will see the full manifestation of God. Let me point it out to this, especially for somebody that are a little bit older. Have you not noticed how over the years the sex trafficking thing has just gotten worse and worse and worse? That's what it's going to be like, but it will be at its full capacity at that point. All sin, just like the homosexual agenda, it's gotten to the point where now you have children, right? Hormone therapy, it will reach. That's not even we haven't gotten to the fullness yet. Mass shootings, all these things. We haven't mass execution. Guys, Hitler, put it this way, Hitler wasn't even the fullness. But sin will reach its fullness. You had a question?
Yeah, you said Satan's going to be on the earth, but then in one of the, I don't know how long ago, you said also Jesus was going to be on the earth.
So it's saying that this is before Jesus comes back. This is during the Great Tribulation. So he'll be on the earth. The devil, Hasatan, Lucifer. Well, he's not omnipresent, but yeah, some people, he'll be physically on the earth. Yeah, and he won't be able to leave the earth. Now he can go to heaven and go before God. He won't be able to anymore. He'll be shut off and in the earth. And during that time, he will release his full wrath on the people of God, because that's all Revelation, 11, 12, 13, etc. Okay. Now here's the point I want to make, and I was getting into this earlier. God is going to use this pressure as the perfect environment to prepare to empower his people to walk in love and purity, right? And here's the principle. Two things. Number one, Romans 8:28 will be just as real then as it is now. What's Romans 8:28? We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God. So even the Great Tribulation is going to work for the good of those who love God. I want to point this out. Matthew chapter 5, verse 8. Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God."
That's so crazy. I was going to ask you that scripture earlier, but I was like, I didn't want to.
No, it's perfect. So here's the point. Why is that scripture important? Most of us, when we think of purity, we think of innocence. It's different. My baby is innocent. Purity is different. Purity means you've gone through refining fire, and that fire has purified you. In other words, God will use the fire of persecution to so purify people, we will walk in the greatest revelation of Jesus in any other generation. So even all that wrath, all that bad stuff, the Lord will use for good, if we're willing to walk through it with tender hearts. Right? And that's that victorious church overcoming the difficulty. Now, God's redemptive purpose in allowing the Great Tribulation is to create the context to, number one, purifies people, right? Look at this, Daniel 11. And some of those of understanding shall fall. They're going to be martyred in order to refine, this is Daniel 11, in order to refine them, purify them, and make them white until the time of the end. So God will use the persecution, the martyrdom, the physical pain to actually mature love. So that's the maturing of love will happen in the context of the Great Tribulation. Right? Daniel chapter 12, verse 10. Many shall be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly. Again, it's the paradox of the Great Tribulation. Right? How are the righteous being purified and made white? Through the wicked acts of the wicked. God's using that conflict like an oven of fire to put gold in, and when you come out of it, you're coming out as pure gold. And so it says, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. In other words, we will know what's happening. So we're not going to be confused. We're not going to be caught off guard. We're not going to be offended. We know, oh, this is the love of God. Or how about this? I've been praying for the baptism of fire. Here it is. This is God baptizing me in fire. This is what, remember James and John come to Jesus with their mother, and they said, can one sit on your right, one on your left? Jesus says, it's not for me to decide. He goes, can you be baptized with the baptism that I'm to be baptized with? What was the baptism Jesus was about to go through? Rejection and death. And they said, he goes, oh, you're going to experience it. In other words, the baptism of fire is pressure and persecution. And the Lord uses it to purify, okay? Again, and the next thing is the Lord is going to use this to bring in the great harvest and the salvation of Israel. So it's within the context of the great tribulation that the great harvest is brought in and the salvation of Israel. Because remember, there's going to be people that are good people. They don't believe in the Lord. But sin will so reach this massive capacity, they're going to seek Jesus because he will be the only thing that makes sense to what's happening. Yeah. Does that make sense? In other words, they will become incredibly receptive to the gospel because of the condition of culture, because of the condition of the world. Is that making sense? All right. Let's talk about some of the negative people and events. All right. Number one, the Antichrist. Who's the Antichrist? Oh, it wasn't Donald Trump. Sorry for some of you. It ain't Joe Biden. Sorry for the rest of you. No, it ain't Hillary either. No. Yes, I believe it's coming out of the Muslim world. This is my opinion. Now, my friend is a scholar in this, so I kind of say it's an opinion, but it's a pretty well-founded opinion. And if we had a whole another session, I can get into why. But I'll tap into it a little bit, okay? So the Antichrist. We'll look at some verses here. And if you really want to understand about the Antichrist, Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 through 10 is a great place to go. But why don't you turn your Bible? So write down Revelation 13, 1 through 10, and you'll really get where you see the Antichrist. But let's go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Right before 1 Timothy. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. The Antichrist, before we read that, will wage war against Jesus and his people, and he will be the most powerful, evil leader in history. I want to say that again. The Antichrist will be the most powerful, evil leader in history. Okay? Go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9. The coming of the lawless one. Who's the lawless one? Antichrist. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan with all powers, signs, and lying wonders. Right? So here's the point. So the Antichrist is going to have, and I'll explain what the 10-nation confederation is in a little bit. He's going to have a 10-nation confederation. He will have the largest army in human history. 10 different countries are going to actually pledge their allegiance to the Antichrist, and they're going to give him all of his power. And the Antichrist is going to come from a particular country. So you're talking about 11 armies put together as one massive empire. So we're not just talking about like this random guy that works at Walmart. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a very, very, very powerful political figure. Okay? And he's going to use demonic miracles to deceive. He's going to use political processes to kill those who resist him and economic oppression to control nations. He is a political figure and a religious figure. Right? And again, this is not, I'm going to tell you this is my opinion. I think it's a pretty well-founded opinion that comes from a lot of research. And I believe it'll be a Muslim leader because no other people group on the earth have the mix of policy and religion like Islam. It's Sharia law. All right? And we can get into some of that later. Now, here's the other point. In Islamic eschatology, they are awaiting three people. We're awaiting three people. The Antichrist, false prophet, and Jesus. They have the Mahdi, false Jesus, which for them is the real Jesus, and the false prophet, which is our Jesus. The Mahdi is the Islamic Messiah, and according to Islamic eschatology, he's going to be a political leader, he's going to unify the world, and his kingdom is going to be based out of Jerusalem. That is in the Quran. That sounds like anybody you know. And his purpose is to make Islam the global religion, and anybody that refuses Islam will be executed. Okay, the book of Revelation describes the manner in which the martyrs are executed during the Great Tribulation. You know how that's described? Beheaded. Do you know how Islam in the Quran commands its people to execute infidels? Beheading. Why? Because that was Muhammad's preferred way of execution. Okay, let's keep going. The next person is the false prophet. Revelation 13, 11 through 18. The false prophet will be the leader of a worldwide religious network devoted to causing all the people on the earth to worship Satan and the Antichrist, okay? And Satan is going to give him he's going to give demonically empowered speeches that will be confirmed by miracles. These guys are going to work miracles. The false prophet will have supernatural power and will work miracles. This is why Jesus says, do not be deceived. There are going to come, and this is why we have to know the real Jesus, and we have to know his voice, we have to know truth, because these people are going to perform miracles and will get many to buy into the Antichrist, to worship Satan, and a good portion of them will be leaders in the body of Christ that will fall into deception. Okay? And the false prophet will help the Antichrist. He's going to help implement an economic system that will be used, and it will be the form of worship. And that economic system is called the mark of the beast. All right? So he's going to set up two things. And we're going to get into these. The image of the beast and the mark of the beast. The false prophet will set it up. Now, in Islamic eschatology, who I would consider the false prophet, they consider Jesus. And what they say is that Jesus is going to come down from heaven, and he's going to tell the whole world he's Jesus, and that everything the Christians ever said about him was wrong, and that Islam is the true religion, Muhammad is his prophet, and he will go on a worldwide campaign performing miracles, getting people to worship the Antichrist. Now, in the beginning, it's going to be peaceful. But then they're going to change and create an edict that anybody, especially people of the book, Christians and Jews, that refuse to deny Christianity. By the way, this is in the Quran. They refuse to deny Christianity and not worship the Mahdi, they will be executed. And Jesus will go on an obviously it ain't Jesus, but according to Islamic eschatology, he will go on a worldwide martyrdom campaign to execute everyone that refuses to worship the Antichrist. And they'll know who's pledged allegiance because they will have the mark of the beast. And that mark of the beast isn't just the sign of your allegiance, it's also the economic currency to how to buy, sell, and trade during the Great Tribulation. But it's more than just a currency, it's a sign of your religious allegiance to the Antichrist.
They will call him Jesus, right?
They will say it's Jesus. And that's what Jesus is referring to in Matthew 24. And he says, many false Christs shall come. But the false Christ shall come, and it'll be the false prophet.
So when the world sees the Antichrist, they're going to know him as Jesus.
No, the Antichrist, they won't know. The Antichrist will be a Middle Eastern person.
Right, but they think it's Jesus.
No, the false prophet.
Oh, the false prophet they're calling Jesus.
Yes.
Okay, and do you believe the world will see the false prophet?
Absolutely. He'll be the second most prominent leader on the planet.
I mean, as named Jesus.
Some will.
Okay.
Yeah. Those that buy into it. Remember, there's people that are neutral. They're like, this stuff, I don't know. I don't even believe in Jesus. They're going to be like, you're all crazy. Right? Those are the neutral people. They're like, I don't even believe in Jesus. So you obviously ain't him because he ain't real. And then there's going to be people that weren't even believers. They're going to be like, well, he must be the real Jesus because I can see him. I can hear him. Look at all the miracles he's doing. They solved the Middle East crisis. They made peace in Israel. And he helped rebuild the temple. And he reinstituted animal sacrifices. Remember, the Antichrist campaign begins before the Great Tribulation. All this stuff, people buying into it, is during a time of peace. And we won't get into it because we're not going to be able to get into the fourth session. But there is a time of false peace. That first 3.5 year period is false peace. These guys are doing miracles, world events. Things are amazing. They're solving massive political crises. The false Jesus is performing miracles. And people are buying into it. Then when the Great Tribulation begins, that's when they go on the campaign to execute anybody that resists the Antichrist. Does that make sense?
Where do the 666 come in at?
So the old 666, the number of the beast, I'll be honest, I don't know what it means. Because the scripture isn't clear. I don't know. I do know that the mark of the beast, however it is, whether it's a chip or whatever, the purpose of it is to buy and sell, but it is the sign that you believe in the Antichrist. Now I'm going to tell you my personal opinion. 666, the number of the beast, which is the number of man, because I believe that the whole spirit of the Antichrist will be in the beginning. And I'd have to break this down in a second, but in the beginning, the main narrative will be secular humanism. And eventually the secular humanism narrative will be replaced with Islam. That's my opinion. But if I take out the Islam piece, I can tell you this for a fact. that the Antichrist will use secular humanism in the beginning, because he uses harlot Babylon, and he will replace secular humanism with a form of religion, and that religion will do away with all other religion. That will be, because the Antichrist does establish a religious system of worship on the earth. That is not an argument. That is very clear in the book of Revelation. He will be worshipped as God. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. Again, I just believe that religion is Islam. And I'll point this out to you. One very interesting thing. Well, let me get to harlot Babylon, and then I'll point something out that'll blow your little minds a little bit. The next is the 10-nation confederation. This is a political, military, and economic alliance of 10 nations that will provide the Antichrist with the greatest power base of any man in history. Okay? 10 different armies. All right. Let's talk about this. Let's go to Revelation chapter 13. That's the whole chapter talking about the Antichrist and the false prophet. Verse 1. Then I stood in the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having, okay, what is the beast? It's an empire. It's the full Antichrist empire that's made up of the 10-nation confederation. Does that make sense? So you have 10 nations together make an empire. The Roman Empire was made up of multiple countries. Does that make sense? So when you read beast, empire. Horn, nation. Does that make sense? Is that confusing? Okay.
In Daniel 7, when you get to the end, I think verses 15 to the last, his vision talks about beasts too. Is that?
That's the same thing. It's the empire.
Okay.
It's the empire. So picture a monster. Picture a monster. Sometimes it's just the Antichrist, but when it's referring to the beast and the horns, it's the whole empire. But in other words, it's the Antichrist's empire. It's that nation it's the embodiment of him. Does that make sense? So I want you to picture a beast. Actually, why don't you stand up here, Absalom? Pretend Absalom is a beast. But because I want you to get what John saw. He saw a beast, and on top of the beast were 10 horns. The beast is the full empire. The horns are the 10 kingdoms. And then there's one horn, that is the Antichrist. That is the actual particular country he comes from. All those 10 countries make the whole empire, which is the beast system. The mark of the beast, it's the economic religious system of the empire. Like the Roman Empire was all over the globe. It was multiple countries. Does that make sense? It's like the United Kingdom is England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, all that's all a part of the United Kingdom. So picture that when you read beast, it's the full thing. It's all the countries that have come together under the Antichrist. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's the way to view it. So I saw a beast. What's the beast? The empire. And it's the man. It's both. Does that make sense? Yeah. And on his having 7 heads. Okay. I'm going to break this down for you in a minute. Okay? 7 heads. And I'm going to tell you why. Now, I don't normally do this, but again, this comes from much research. This is not just talking out of one of my heads. It's a joke. There's 7 heads. I'm not talking out of my head. I'll tell you which country I believe the Antichrist is coming out of. It's not dogmatic, but in eschatological circles, there's only 2 possible countries that people debate. Only 2. The first one is Rome. Second one is Turkey. By the way, I've been to Rome a bunch of times. These guys, I don't think they're worried about taking over the world. Like, I think they're just busy making pasta. But anyway, no opinion. And I don't believe it's the Pope. I don't believe it's the Catholic Church. A lot of people do, and that comes from conservative evangelicals that hate Catholicism. Right. But honestly, no, I think the Pope's just too busy trying to deal with the sex scandals, and he's not worried about taking over the world. I mean, I could understand why people thought that 500 years ago. But let's just be honest. In the last 30, 50, 100 years, I mean, what is the Catholic Church? Right? Yeah. But so in eschatological circles, there's 2 possible countries that people debate: Rome and Turkey. Those are the 2 ones. Okay, and I'm going to give you why I think it's Turkey. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you my opinion is Turkey. Why I think it's Turkey. You don't have to agree with me. I don't care. It doesn't matter. The Lord knows, and He'll be right, and we'll figure out if I was right or wrong, or we were both wrong, or we were both right. I don't know. But the point is, I'll tell you why I think it's Turkey. Okay? You guys good? Okay. The beast had 7 heads. What are the 7 heads? Those are the 7 different empires that existed. There are 7 empires that have existed in human. There's only been 7 world empires in history since the beginning of time. Did you guys know that? Only 7. All of these 7 had 2 things in common. Number 1, they all had most of the known world conquered. Well, there's 3 things in common. Number 2, they all had control of Jerusalem. And number 3, the ones that came after always took over the one that was before it. And there's only been 7 of them. And all 7 had control of Jerusalem at one point. Now, the first one, it wasn't called Jerusalem, it had a different name, but it was over that land. All right, I'm going to break this down for you guys. 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns are 10 crowns. And on his head a blasphemous name. Okay, now the beast I saw was a leopard, describes a leopard, da-da-da-da. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast. Who's the dragon? Satan. So they worshiped Satan because Satan gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, now this is specifically the Antichrist, who is like the beast and who is able to make war with him. So here you see this beast with 7 heads, and one of the heads is mortally wounded, and then the head resurrects. What is that talking about? What are the 7 heads? By the way, this is where the idea of 7 mountains comes from. So later on, you'll see the whore of Babylon on 7 mountains. What is the 7? It's the 7 global empires. What are the 7 global empires? What is the first world empire? I'll give you a clue. Israel was there for 400 years. Egypt. Who conquers Egypt? Babylon. Who conquers Babylon? Persia. Who conquers Persia? Nope, the Greeks. You guys watch 300? You better not. The Greeks. Who conquered Greece? Rome. Right? That's the 5th one. No, I'm missing one. Let's put pause. It's, I'm missing one. No, Egypt? Egypt? There's one in between Egypt and... There's 7. I'm missing one. No, that's the last one. Because Rome is 6. So Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Greece. No, it might be, oh yeah, it is Assyria. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Greece. No, Babylon, Persia, Greece. Rome is 6. And then the 7th one is Turkey. So later on in Revelation, John says, there were 5 other beasts. The 6th one now is, so he's alive during the 6th one. What's the 6th one? Rome. And the 7th one is coming, and the 8th is of the 7th. This is what John says later on. The 8th is of the 7th. So the point is, one of the heads is wounded and it comes back. What we know is that the 7th empire is going to come back, and that 7th empire is the 8th empire. My understanding of it is that what's going to make the world marvel is out of nowhere, Turkey, which was the Ottoman Empire, will rise up again and come back to global prominence. Most of what you see in Jerusalem today was built by the Ottoman Empire, built by Turkey. Who sealed up the wall, the Eastern Gate? The Ottoman Empire. Who made all of Mount Zion a Muslim burial ground? The Ottoman Empire, Turkey. Go to Ezekiel 38, you have Gog and Magog. Gog is the Antichrist, Magog is the country, and he lists all of the ancient places that make up Magog. He lists 8 cities. 5 of the 8 cities are modern day Turkey. So is that, I don't know, but I think there's a lot of scholars that believe that it'll be a Muslim Antichrist, or half Muslim or Jewish, but it'll be a Muslim Antichrist coming out of Turkey, and we will see the prominence of the Ottoman Empire. Here's what I do know. We have missionaries in Turkey right now, and Erdogan, who's the president of Turkey, his goal is to, not, by the way, I don't believe it's Erdogan, just so you know, so don't take out of context. Erdogan's goal is to restore the Ottoman Empire. Whether he does or not, it just makes your head spin. But one of the massive things that's going to happen is it'll be twofold. Number one, it'll be the restoration of a fallen empire. Number two, a lot of scholars believe that the Antichrist himself will experience some sort of wounding or death and will be resurrected. And it'll make many people marvel. Well, it doesn't say that in Revelation. So the problem is it talks about the mortal wound of the beast, right? But the problem is the beast, is it talking about beast as in country or beast as in person? It's not clear. So that's why I say it could be both. Personally, because of the consistency of Scripture, I believe it's the resurrection of a country. Because it'll make people marvel. Because, guys, if Turkey became a global empire that had 10 different countries in allegiance with it, wouldn't you be like, what? Where? I thought it was going to be China. Everyone's focused about China and Russia, and all of a sudden Turkey just takes over half the world. Wouldn't it make your head scratch a little bit? And the other interesting thing about Turkey, it's the only Muslim country where half of it is in Europe, Istanbul, half of Istanbul is in Europe, and the other half is in Asia. And it's the only Muslim country in the European Union. Whatever, let's keep going. The image of the beast, the Antichrist is going to, the false prophet is going to set up this image in the rebuilt temple, and it will be a statue of the Antichrist that is demonically empowered, and it'll talk and breathe and so forth, and it'll be in the Jerusalem temple, and anybody that does not worship the image of the beast will be executed. Here's the point I want to make. John emphasizes the image of the beast 10 times in the book of Revelation. 10 times he refers to the image of the beast. And the best way to think about it is think of Nebuchadnezzar setting up the image of himself and calling people to worship. Oh, dadgummit. All right, let's keep going. The mark of the beast. Uh-oh. Is it the vaccine? I don't know. I'm telling my opinion, but I don't think it is. But I do think it's a precursor. But that's just my opinion. I know a lot of things are precursors, right? I think music is a precursor. Okay, the mark of the beast will be a mark on people's right hands or foreheads. The scripture says that. And the purpose of it, it will be used to help identify those who worship the Antichrist. This is important. You will not accidentally get the mark of the beast at CVS. Like, you're like, dang it. No, these are, in other words, you get it because you've pledged allegiance to the Antichrist. It's the proof that you're serious about the Antichrist. Okay? And it will be required in order to have access to the global economic system that the Antichrist is going to establish. So people say, well, how are we going to buy food if we don't take the mark of the beast? Well, the same way the Israelites had food. God will multiply it. Same thing, right? Remember, if the Antichrist can be supernatural, we're going to be extra supernatural. Those who refuse to receive the mark of the beast will not be allowed to buy or sell, and this will be viewed as criminal of the state who are guilty of the death. So those that were, sorry, I wrote that really bad. Those who receive the mark of the beast will be viewed as criminals and will receive the death penalty in countries that embrace the beast economic system. In other words, if your country that you live in is in allegiance with the Antichrist and you refuse the mark of the beast, you'll receive the death penalty. Because they will execute, there would be places on the earth where refusal to receive the mark of the beast, which is refusal to worship the Antichrist, is you receive the death penalty. You'll be executed. All right, is that good? I'm not good. Are you guys following along? All right, the abomination of desolation. Say that 10 times fast. The abomination of desolation, or the abomination that makes things desolate. The abomination of desolation occurs when the Antichrist is going to declare himself as God, and he sets up his image in the temple. So remember, the Antichrist is going to help Israel rebuild the temple, and he will reinstitute animal sacrifices for 3.5 years. At 3.5 years, he's going to renege on that. He's going to break the covenant. He's going to begin persecution. And then he will enter into the temple, and he's going to declare himself to be God. That is the abomination that makes desolation. Jesus spoke of it as the sign, that is the definitive sign that you have now entered the Great Tribulation. That is the most definitive sign that you've now entered the final 3. In other words, once that happens, you know there's 3.5 years left. There's only 42 months left. And I remember my wife and I, we had a conversation with Mike Bickle. We were processing this, and she was like, having kids. And he's like, here's the good news. He goes, think about being in the Holocaust. You don't know how long it's going to last. This could be forever. With the Great Tribulation, you can count down on the months. All right, we got 30 more months to go. Like, we already made 12. But the point is, you know how long it's going to be. That is the sign. So someone says, who do you think the Antichrist is? And I said, very simple. Whoever sits in the temple and says, I'm God, worship me. That's the Antichrist. What do you think about Trump? I don't know. There's no rebuilt temple. What do you think about Biden? There's no rebuilt temple. Does that make sense? That's the sign. Jesus made it very clear in Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. When you see the abomination that makes desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, open parentheses, let the reader understand, close parentheses, then you will know. In other words, that is the sign, and that is the transition into the Great Tribulation. Does that make sense? So the two elements of the abomination are the image and the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast begins after the abomination that makes desolation, because it's a form of worship. Does that make sense? Okay, so the abomination speaks of a great evil that is an abomination in God's sight, and the result is that it's going to lead to much destruction. And that great destruction is known as the Great Tribulation, right? It will be an abomination to God because the Antichrist is going to demand the earth to worship him as God, and many people are going to obey him. It's like Satan in Isaiah 14 trying to get up to the throne of the Most High, and this time he'll think he'll have accomplished it, and many people are going to buy into it, even leaders in the body of Christ. Right? And here's the deal. When he does this, his words are going to be confirmed by many demonic signs and wonders, and people are going to buy into it, right? And so the desolation is going to happen in two ways. Number one, the Antichrist is going to seek to destroy or desolate anybody who refuses to worship him, right? And the second is God will destroy in judgment those who yield to the pressure and worship the Antichrist. A lot of destruction going on. All right. Now, I said this earlier, but I want to read this. The abomination of desolation is the only political, religious event that Jesus identified to let his people know that they were in the generation of his return. Paul and John, they give more details about the abomination of desolation. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and Revelation 13. But Jesus said, this is it. This is the definitive sign. And that's how you'll know who the Antichrist is. But see, it's important because if you don't know this stuff, you won't know that that guy in the temple is the Antichrist. Right. Don't just think it's some religious nut. Well, it's not the religious nut. That's the son of perdition right there. It's the man of lawlessness, right? That's the guy. And there's 42 months left now. See, that's the power of having understanding, right? Okay. I'm just trying to think. I don't want to overkill you. Well, let's keep going. All right. We're going to look at three more things. I was going to get into the three different kinds of judgments, but I won't get into. Well, I'll just say this. No, that's going to be too much because you'll have questions. What about the seals and what about the trumpets? We won't get into that right now. Martyrdom. So let's talk about a few more things. Martyrdom. There will be an unprecedented number of Christians who are martyred during that time. There's so many verses on that. Like, I think right here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, at least 21 verses right here just on martyrdom. So it is going to be real, and it'll be in a global scale. Here's what I mean in a global context. Will everyone experience martyrdom? Obviously not. But I believe for the first time ever, a majority or a good portion of believers will experience it to some degree. Or you'll know someone that is martyred. Let me rephrase that. I don't believe a majority of believers will be martyred, but it will affect the majority of believers' lives. Like, how many of you know a martyr? I believe everybody here will know a martyr at that time. That's what I mean by that. You know, and we were processing this. Let's say today in the body of Christ, maybe 1% of the church has been martyred. Maybe then it'll be 20, 30, 40%. It won't be everyone. It might not even be half. But a good portion of the church will experience martyrdom. Does that make sense? And it'll be global. What I mean by good portion is it won't just be limited to the Middle East and China. It'll be worldwide. It'll be a worldwide thing. Believers all over the world will experience it. Like right now, martyrdom happens in very few places. This time it'll happen in a lot of places, globally, in multiple countries. Does that make sense? Here's a few verses. Revelation 13:7. It was granted to the Antichrist to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given to him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. Jesus said, Matthew 24:9, they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all. It's encouraging. Revelation 17:6, I saw the woman, who's the woman? Harlot Babylon, we're going to talk about her in a second, drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. Okay, talk about harlot Babylon, because this is going to answer your Michael Jackson question. What is harlot Babylon? Harlot Babylon is the religious system that exists before the Great Tribulation. All right, so harlot Babylon, for me, the way I understand it, it is the spirit of the age. In other words, it is the driving force behind culture and the entertainment industry. The Antichrist is going to partner with harlot Babylon, but when the Great Tribulation begins, he will destroy harlot Babylon because he's going to do away with the coexist, New Age thing, and he's going to establish his religious system as the religion. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right? So harlot Babylon, it will be, some actually people believe that the actual city of Babylon, which is 50 miles outside of Baghdad in Iraq, is actually going to be rebuilt. A lot of people actually believe that. Like a lot of very, very, very credible people. You know, that sounds kind of crazy to us unless you understand that the whole storyline of the scriptures, the whole climax is taking place in the Middle East. Just think about that. The whole storyline is in the Middle East. Jerusalem's going to go to war with all the countries surrounding it, right? And so now, will I dogmatically say that's going to happen? No, but I'm saying many, many scholars do believe that the actual literal city of Babylon gets rebuilt. Now, I know that sounds far-fetched, but there's actually a very interesting thing. Again, I don't know if that's true. I'm not telling you I believe that, but I'm saying there's a lot of scholars that do. But I will tell you this, you know, that I can see the possibility of that because stuff like that's already happening. Right now in Dubai, they're building the first ever world religion headquarters. It's like a well, everything in Dubai is a multi-million-dollar facility. But it's like a multi-million-dollar facility. And when they mean world religion, it's called Chrislam, or I forget what it's called, but it's actually Islam, Judaism, and Christianity together as one religion based out of Dubai, which is in the Middle East. And you say, well, why would they rebuild Babylon? Friends, it's so simple. All this stuff, even the coexist stuff, the one world religion, all of that stuff is migrating towards the Middle East because that is the climax. It's the centerpiece of the end of the story, is that little section of the world. That's why there's so much turmoil. So is it going to happen? I don't know. Is it possible? Absolutely. I mean, at this point, you read the rest of the book, anything's possible. You got all these weird creatures coming out of the sea and all this stuff. I don't know. But the point is, we do know there will be a system, a religious network, and an economic network known as harlot Babylon. And what it is the driving force behind culture, industry, economics, and entertainment until the Great Tribulation. Does that make sense? And I'm going to give you the best way I know how to explain it as I process and meditate this stuff. My understanding, and you go read Revelation 17 and 18, harlot Babylon is the spirit of the age. Like coexist, LGBTQ movement, transgender, all that is harlot Babylon. The entertainment industry, so much of the music industry, the over-sexualization of culture, that is harlot Babylon. The Antichrist in the beginning, because remember he's going to go on this peace campaign, is going to use harlot Babylon. In other words, he will use entertainment, arts, media, fashion, world politics, all of that stuff to build up his case as this world religious leader and call the world to follow him. But the point is, and you see this in the book of Revelation 13, the Antichrist will turn on harlot Babylon and he will actually destroy her. And I'm going to use very, very basic way. And again, my belief is the Antichrist is going to bring in Islam. And you're seeing this already where Islam is actually being normalized in culture and presented as this religion of peace. And so what happens is you'll have entertainers, singers, musicians on their Instagram, on their podcasts, promoting Islam, promoting the Antichrist, and then in a moment he'll turn against them. He'll destroy it because he'll get rid of social media. He'll get rid of free speech. The Antichrist is not a coexist guy. He is in the beginning, but then you're going to find out that he used you, but he's not a coexist guy. He's like, I'm the guy. And if you don't worship me, I'm going to kill you. So he will use it. And so when people ask me in the music the question about music, this harlot Babylon stuff, I take it really serious. And I was like, no. Where are they getting their source from? Harlot Babylon. It's a spirit. Harlot Babylon is a spirit and a culture. Some believe that the city is going to be rebuilt and it's going to be almost like the headquarters, if you will, of all of this cesspool of stuff. And it is the headquarters of sexualization and perversion and all of that stuff. And it is how people are influenced. And you read this, when Harlot Babylon is destroyed, people are absolutely devastated because they've lost how they make their money. Their fame, their whole lives have been built around the culture of Harlot Babylon. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. So let me just say this. The voluntary Harlot Babylon religion will be replaced. Remember, Harlot Babylon is voluntary. It's like today, right? Free will, coexist, do what you want, blah, 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 blah. That will be replaced by a mandatory antichrist religion. Harlot Babylon is like, do what you want, make yourself happy, cesspool of immorality. Antichrist is, no, this is it. And if you don't do it, you're going to be executed. Right? And remember, in the beginning, the Antichrist is going to use Harlot Babylon. The harlot religion will prepare the nations to actually receive the Antichrist. Entertainers have no idea what they're doing because they're being used. Right? It will be a religion of affirmation and toleration with absolutes and will function as a counterfeit justice movement that will feed the poor and be involved in humanitarian projects. It's this global, because remember, the whole beginning part of the Antichrist campaign is world peace and unifying the nations. But it's not the right sort of unity. It's the wrong unity. And here's what's going to happen. Multitudes will be seduced into joining Harlot Babylon religion, which will weaken their conscience concerning their religious heritage. Then the Antichrist is going to take those people and demand that they worship him and Satan. So clear. Revelation 13, verse 4 and 8. Go read Revelation 13 and then Revelation 17 and Revelation 18. All right. Are you guys good? Is that making sense at all? Last point, last 2 points. The great falling away or the great apostasy, right? The great falling away. The end time falling away, also known as the great apostasy, will be one of the most tragic and serious realities in human history. Now, I want to say this very clearly. Paul presented the great falling away, or the great apostasy, to be as obvious and significant as the appearing of the Antichrist on the world stage. For Paul, it's equal in severity. For Paul, the great falling away, and these are believers. Remember, you can't fall away if you're not a believer. The great falling away is as important as the appearance of the Antichrist. All right, let me show you these verses. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3. Let no one deceive you by any means. For that day, what day? The day of the Lord is returned. In context of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Sorry, that was like a trick question. In the context of that day, the Lord's return, because that's what they're asking about. 1 and 2 Thessalonians, it's because the believers thought they missed the Lord's return. And he's like, no. Let me break this down for you. It says, that day will not come, again, for all the pre-tribulation rapture people, unless the falling away comes first and the man of sin. Who's the man of sin? The Antichrist is revealed. He puts those two together. Okay? 1 Timothy 4:1. Now the Spirit expressly says, it urgently says in the latter times, some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons. And so what you're going to see is the beginning of not just actual apostate churches and entire churches that are filled with people that are fallen away or an apostate. In other words, they've aligned themselves with Harlot Babylon, and then many will align themselves with the Antichrist. And they'll believe the message of the false prophet, and they'll buy into these things, and they will go into deception because they actually believe that they're obeying God and pleasing the Lord with what they're doing. But then they will be greatly overwhelmed when they realize that the Lord will actually come and resist them. And here's the last point I'll make on that is there are apostate, this is not something that's going to happen in the future. There already are apostate believers and apostate churches today. Yes. All right, the last one, Armageddon campaign. What's the battle? Who's ever heard of the Battle of Armageddon? Raise your hand. It's not in the Bible. Oh. No? What were you saying? That's Lord of the Rings. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Armageddon campaign. Sorry, I was making sure my wife, that wasn't someone else. Armageddon campaign. There is no battle of Armageddon. What is Armageddon? So Armageddon is not a battle, but a location in northern Israel. What does Armageddon means? Because in the Hebrew word Har Megiddo, Mount Megiddo. It is the valley directly under Mount Megiddo. By the way, it's a really nice like farmland. We were driving there, I was like, dang, this is going to be really bad. What a waste of farmland. What is it? What is the Armageddon campaign? The Armageddon campaign is a location in northern Israel that will function as the military staging area that the Antichrist uses to mobilize his armies. It's just their base. That's all it is. In other words, he will gather his armies. Their gathering place is the Valley of Armageddon, but then they're going to go from there to go into the wars, into the battles. But there is no battle in Armageddon because the battle is where? Outside of Jerusalem, because that's what they're fighting for. They're fighting for Mount Zion. The Antichrist gathers his army in Megiddo. Jesus gathers his army from across the world in Jordan, and they meet outside of Jerusalem, and that's where they're going to fight.
Is there any type of significance? I know when we were in Israel, you could see Armageddon from Mount Carmel. Is there any significance between them gathering, like the Antichrist gathering his army there, like the prophets of Baal with the Elijah?
That's a really good point. I've never thought about that. I don't know. I don't know why that. I honestly don't even know why that. Why Megiddo? There's so many other places, but why that's the place? I don't know. That's a really good point. I do know what town is right by the valley of Megiddo is Nazareth. It's a valley of all these little towns on these hills, right? So it's interesting. So Jesus is going to return in the context of a military conflict around Jerusalem. That's what this whole thing is about, okay? He will fight and win the battle of Jerusalem, and that's going to end the Armageddon campaign. The Armageddon campaign lasts 3.5 years. In other words, every time the Antichrist is going to use his military to inflict punishment or terror, their gathering place is the Valley of Armageddon. Does that make sense? It's all it is. It's a gathering place, political war strategy, and then they go out and they go, but no actual gather happens. But where is the battle? It's against Jerusalem. Zechariah 14, 2 and 3. For I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. The war is for Jerusalem. It's not for the Valley of Armageddon. Does that make sense? So both God and Satan will draw men to Armageddon and Jerusalem. They have different purposes for drawing them. God's going to gather all the kings and their armies to Jerusalem so they might destroy them in one day. Satan will draw the nations to Armageddon in an attempt to destroy Israel. Does that make sense? All right. We're done. Amen. Amen.